Live, presented by Hot Metal. And as promised, a wonderful guest, legendary guest, Eddie Spaghetti from the Supersuckers, soon to be in Oz. How are you, Eddie?
Woo, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for doing this interview. I really appreciate it. Now, I've been watching, as I said to you off air, you've been doing a lot of press, and I'm sure everyone's grateful to hear from you ahead of the tour. And during the interviews you've been doing with others, you've sort of let drop a few things, and they haven't seized on those things. So what I thought I'd do is do the best of Eddie's Australian interviews and go and get you to kind of expand on some of the things you've said in the other interviews. And no one will need to watch or listen to any of the others. They can just listen to this. It's a greatest hits. Okay, is that cool?
Okay, great.
So the first thing I noticed you said is that you've got a new record deal, and you kind of started to talk about it a little bit, but then moved on to another subject. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we just I don't know, signed a new record contract for the first time in years and years, with a label called Hard Charger. It's a little thing out of the States. It's an imprint by a friend of ours named Jesse Dayton, who he's a good Texas artist, and just been a great friend of the band's. And he's a little bit entrepreneurial, I suppose, and has a little label. And he decided to talk the powers that be into signing the Supersuckers. So we did that, and now we just wait for the disappointment to ensue.
And also, here's another thing you've said in a couple of interviews: you have a new record. You have enough songs that you love enough that you're going to play on this tour. So tell us about the record. Tell us about the recording process, and tell us about the music.
Yeah, well, we do what we do. We wrote a bunch of new songs and we recorded them, and we're excited about it. And then, some, bullshit happened, and so we're still waiting for the record to be completed. We haven't quite finished mixing it yet, but we're so excited about the songs. And yeah, we're going to play some of them live. And I tend to have a policy against playing songs that people aren't familiar with live, because it's usually such a lull in the show. Everybody's like, oh, here's a song I haven't heard yet. But the songs are so good that everybody seems to love them. So that's, it's testimonial to the songwriting power in the band.
Here's a detail which I really have to seize on, that it was going to be mixed by someone who works with Brendan O'Brien, but he is busy working with Metallica. Now, I don't think it's out there that Metallica are working with Brendan O'Brien on a new album. So tell us.
Well, Metallica apparently are in the process of compiling all this live footage for, I don't know how many songs, hundreds of songs. And my friend who works with Brendan O'Brien and recorded our record, he's been editing Lars drum tracks for the last year. And it's just, we get pushed aside because Lars can pay the bills and the Supersuckers still owe.
And your friend who works for Brendan O'Brien, you haven't named him. Will he come out from behind the screen at some point?
Well, his name is Billy Joe Bowers, and
okay.
We've worked with him before, and we decided to work with him again. And it's just such a pain in the ass to work with this guy because he's so fucking busy. So I don't know if we're going to do that again, but it's a great record, and we're really happy with the recording.
Before I move on from the new record, do you have a title for it? And can you tell us about the subject? Is it inspired by any current events, or is it,
No, it's more just, snarky musings from the mind of Eddie Spaghetti. But we have a kind of a tentative title, but we're not sure if we're going to stick with it yet. So we're not divulging that information just yet.
Welcome back to White Line Fever, second part of our interview with Eddie Spaghetti, and he's kind of under the grill a little bit. I'm trying to sort of pick up a few things he said in other interviews. And now this I found was interesting about playing on the Tonight Show with Willie Nelson and being stoned out of your mind and scared you were going to embarrass yourself. Have you watched it back? Can you tell, watching it back, that you're stoned? And can you reflect on that a little bit for the viewers and listeners?
I think you can only tell because I know. I don't think it's evident to anybody else. There wasn't any glaring faux pas or anything that happened because of it. In fact, I think in retrospect, getting stoned with Willie Nelson was the best possible thing I could have done in order to make that performance happen like it did, because the sound check was horrible. Like we couldn't get in sync with him, and it never got solved. We left sound check totally unresolved, all this static in our minds about how it's going to go. And Willie was cool. He's like, man, that's good. Let's go on the bus and get stoned, man. Come on. So I did, and it worked out great, but it was it was not a pleasant thing to go through, really.
When you do something like that with a star as big as Willie, is it all through his people, and when it's over, the relationship is over, or is it a personal relationship? Do you have an ongoing relationship with someone like that after that?
Yeah, well, Willie and I kept in touch for quite a while after that, and even fairly recently, he's called to wish me a happy birthday, and so yeah, I mean, all the plans get made with his people and stuff, but after the fact, I have Willie Nelson's phone number.
Awesome.
I was at a bar one time. I had my phone out, and I was at a bar, and I came across Willie Nelson's number, and I was like, let's call Willie Nelson. And I'm sure he wouldn't answer. I call him up. Motherfucker answered. I had to cop to it. I'm like, I was just showing off in a bar that I had your number. Sorry.
What time of night was it?
Oh, I don't know, 10-ish.
He was up. He's
Yeah, he was up.
Probably a late night guy. Now you talk about being at sort of different points in history, and like the 12 Monkeys, where you're everywhere in history. Packing bleach into packets to send out at Sub Pop offices, and stopping and saying, well, I really like this. This band's going to be pretty big, and maybe I can meet them because they're from here. The next step is, after that happened, when did you meet them? What were the circumstances where you met them? Or did you?
Yeah, well, I met Kurt a few times. The first time I met him was at like a house party, and he was just sitting on the floor, just being a loser, basically, like we all were. And that's where I met him first. And then I guess the most memorable time I met him, I was at a show that I was seeing the Breeders, and this is in the 1900s. The Breeders were real popular. Nevermind had just knocked Michael Jackson off of the #1 spot, so it was like a big deal. And I was in the Breeders show, and I kept getting kicked out. I was standing where I wasn't supposed to stand, but I thought, well, I belong here, So they kept kicking me out. I kept running around to the front, going back in, and they finally stopped that. So I'm outside, kicked out, while my friends are still in the club. And this limo pulls up, and Kurt and Courtney get out. And he wasn't on the guest list, apparently. And so she's having a proper wobbler at the ticket booth. And he's just he kind of walks over to me. He's like, hey, Eddie, what's going on? I was like, hey, Kurt. I was kind of surprised that he knew who I was, because this was like, Nevermind was full on. He wasn't just Kurt from down the block anymore. And so we chatted. He's like, see this? She was just going insane on the ticket. Do you know who he is? He just knocked Michael Jackson off the number. She was really doing that. And he's like rolling his eyes like, see what I got to put up with here? And I'm like, better you than me, pal.
One of the things I liked he said was about, someone said, what keeps you going or what keeps you motivated? And he said, well, we so far we haven't been as successful as I think we should have, and that could be still around the corner. But when you look at, I guess, people who who have been, does it give you pause to reconsider that view that maybe it isn't for the best sometimes, that level of success?
Yeah, but I feel like I've wallowed in obscurity long enough. I could handle it.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. Now, the other thing that I noticed was that there is a Tom Werman tape somewhere in a vault somewhere produced Supersuckers. So what happened to the tape? Where is it? I mean, I don't know, did you try and buy it back? What would it cost a fortune, I guess, but what's the story with that?
I mean, I have a CD of it. That's all I have. I don't have the tapes anymore. Or I don't know, I might have the tapes. I have a big pile of tapes somewhere. But I have a CD of it, and I just actually was talking to our vinyl guy recently about putting it out. Like, just let's just put it out. What could Interscope do to us now? It's been almost 30 years, so I'm not too worried about the consequences of it, and I think it will come out probably this year.
Wow, I'm glad I asked. I just flummed asking that question. And does it sound like a Motley Crue album? What does it sound like?
No, it sounds more like I don't know. It's kind of like cheap. It's got a Cheap Trick kind of a quality to it. It's definitely a glossier version of the Supersuckers than people are familiar with, but it's a great record, and and most of those songs wound up being on the Evil Powers of Rock and Roll record, but not all of them.
Welcome back to White Line Fever. My name is Mascord, and third and final part of it. And what I've been doing is sort of going through things he said in other interviews and getting him to expand on them. And so far, so good. He's told us some gems. If I could just get a little more kind of philosophical for a second. Watching this kind of, I thought there are people all over the world who know a lot of things about you. You know what I mean? And that is a different way. And you've been in a band now for so long. It's normal to you, but it's not normal to most people. Most people in their line of work, their line of work is not public facing anyway. And if it is public facing, a very small number of people know what they do. So I just wonder. It must lead to different social situations. Where people kind of don't know boundaries. They think they know you better than they do. And you must have got yourself many decades ago into a routine of dealing with these situations that most people don't have to deal with. I hope you know what I'm talking about. For instance, we're talking on an interview now. If I get off at the end of this Zoom and I think I'm your best friend and I start sending you emails every day, I'm sure these things do happen. And equally, I guess some people are the other way. They're very negative. They think they've got the right to say anything they like to you. So I just wonder, like, what do you advise young musicians about that? About you say it's fame. It is a kind of fame, even though you make jokes about your lack of success all the time. But it is a kind of fame. So how do you deal with those peculiarities of your job?
Well, it's kind of a case by case scenario when it comes to wackos, because you're going to have them, but you just gotta you get a sense of how threatening a certain person can be or not, and you just learn to steer clear of that.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty good judge of when somebody's not going to do something I like.
Yeah, fair enough. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, was when you went to Seattle and you said, you're part of the scene, they welcome you, but you were never a grunge band. And you just talked about Kurt. But there were other things that kind of went with grunge. Obviously, there was fashion, but there was also this sort of slacker aesthetic, wearing plaid, wearing lumberjack shirts and all that sort of stuff. And so I just wonder if you could give us an insight into the scene in terms of the ethos behind it. I mean, you weren't expected to try too hard, were you? And you know what I mean? You were actually expected to kind of not care. What was it when you look back on that now, 30 years? How do you reflect on that? The atmosphere around Seattle at the time.
Yeah, there was a sort of it was an interesting vibe, because when we were in Tucson, bands weren't working together. There was no camaraderie. There was a lot of competition, and everybody was, kind of out for themselves. And so when we got to Seattle, and there was a real sense of community with the bands and with the arts world there, and it was just it was foreign to me, and wonderful. And so that whole ethic of, like, yeah, we're losers, we don't really try. There was that sort of vibe to it, but behind the scenes, everybody's really trying. Everybody's wanting to write really good songs and have a really great band. And so I found that to be a little bit disingenuous, because obviously Nirvana's trying, to sound good. They're not trying.
Yeah, okay. Because it sounds like you've got to move on. So I'm gonna. Well, firstly, a question from a reader, Chris Olson says, "Would you say that most of your songs are about liquor, women, drugs, and killing?" That's a question.
Yes.
Yes, that was easy, wasn't it? And the other question I was going to ask was, I'm going to ask these two questions at once, and I'll let you go. Right. First one is, did grunge kill big rock? As everyone says, was that the meteor that killed the dinosaurs, in your view? And the other one I was going to ask you was, which is I'm going to start to ask everybody, is the first time you heard a song of yours on the radio, what your recollections of that are. And after that, I'm just going to get an ID off you, a third song, and I'll leave you in peace.
All right. So grunge killing big rock, it kind of did, although now it seems to me like the big rock, the hair metal, I guess is what we're talking about,
Yeah.
has sort of won in histories, posthumously has won, because all those songs are so memorable and there's so many hits and good memories around that music. And then with the grunge, like Soundgarden has a couple songs, Nirvana has good songs, Pearl Jam, I'm not singing in those songs, I'm not like, pour some sugar on. That's a great song.
Also, the subject matter is a big difference, isn't it? You want to remember having sugar poured on you. You don't want to remember the kid going to school with a gun. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, to me, it just got grunge got a little too serious. Like it just got to they sucked all the fun out of it. And I agree that hair metal was preposterous and needed to be knocked down a peg. But at the end of the day, it's way more fun to listen to Poison than it is to Pearl Jam.
Yeah, good answer. And do you remember the first time you heard a song of yours on the radio?
I do. It was college radio, so it didn't really count, but it was wonderful. It was this little band I had in Tucson, and there was this local DJ named Jonathan L., who everybody loved and listened to. And he really took a liking to this band that I had in Tucson and started playing them on the radio like every weekend. And it was just wonderful.